Hi, and welcome to a tutorial on JavaScript. In today's tutorial, we will be discussing the switch statement. The switch statement is used to perform actions based on different conditions. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. Let's go to our body and let's create a form. Let's close that form. Let's create an input that I want to be a name. And that is going to be an input. The type equals text, and the ID equals name. Let's create a button. Give that value of the button submit. Type equals button. And the handler we need is an onClick. And we're going to execute a function called switch function. Now that we have created that, let's create a div. Let's give it an ID equals output. Go ahead and close that div. Now let's create our JavaScript. First thing we need to do is we need to create a function called switch function. We do that by writing the word function and giving it the name switch function. And white one outside of that. That's not where it goes though. Alright. Now let's create a variable, and we're going to store whatever's in the input into that variable. So let's go var input equals document.get element by ID. The ID that we're getting is name dot value. Now we're going to create our switch by writing switch, and then in the parentheses we're going to write input, because input value is what is going to be compared to our switch cases. The cases are where we create different cases that can occur, or different conditions that can occur, and if the condition meets the input variable, it'll execute that part of the code. So we do that by typing case. The first one we want to do is called Joe. And we're going to create another variable called output. We're going to equal that to a string of your name is Joe. Then we need to break. Break means break out of this case statement. So if this case is executed, this ends the execution of this case. I'm going to create another case called Bob. Once again, we're going to equal it to var output equals your name is Bob. So we can just copy and paste that, change Joe to Bob. Don't forget to put your break. Then we're going to create a default. The default is what happens if input doesn't equal Joe or Bob. We're going to make this var output equals your name is not Joe or Bob. Now that we have done that, we can go ahead and save. We can refresh our page. And actually, before we hit submit, let's go ahead and let's do, outside of the switch, do a document.get element by ID. The ID we want is output because that's where our output is going to be. Dot inner HTML, meaning we're going to stick something into the HTML, and we're going to stick output, the variable output, into the HTML. Now let's go ahead and save it. Let's go ahead and let's type Joe into the submit field. Obviously something didn't go right here. Output equals your name is Joe. Our input equals document.element by id name dot value. So that looks fine. The switch input, and then it looks for case Joe, case Bob. Let's try doing Bob. Well, let's go ahead and let's put input. Let's save that and let's see what we're getting when we type in these names. Joe, Bob. Break for output. So this should be output. Refresh. Bob. Submit. There we go. Now it's working. Your name is Bob. So I typed Bob into the input field. I hit submit. It came up and it stuck the name Bob into a variable called input. With input into the switch, and then it compared each case to Bob. It went to the first case, did not see that it was Joe, so it went to the second case and saw that it did equal Bob. And so it executed the code within this Bob case, which was sticking the your name is Bob string into a variable called output. And then down here, it outputted what was in the output variable. And if we type Joe in, hit submit, your name is Joe. So it did the same thing, except for instead of skipping Joe, it stopped at Joe because it saw that the case was equal to Joe, and that's what our input was. The last thing we can do is we can put, say, Cindy. Hit submit. Your name is not Joe or Bob. So once again, it went through the code. It stuck Cindy into the input variable. It then went through the case, the switch, and each case it compared Cindy to the case. The first case is Joe. It saw that Cindy is not Joe. Went to the second case, saw Cindy is not Bob, so it went to the default case, which output your name is not Joe or Bob into a variable called output. Then that output it to the user by using the document.getElement by ID with the ID of output.innerHTML. In closing, I have taught you how to create the switch statement and how to compare an input value to the different values within the switch statements that are inside of the case statements. Thank you for watching.